Hello Australia, it's Karen Brewer here. Tonight I'll be going live shortly with James Bartolo, but just before we begin, Australia, I've just heard from our mate Anne over in New Zealand that Jacinda Ardern has in fact sorry, I'm just opening it up so that I can ask people to come. Sorry, I'm just get this organised. Jacinda Ardern has just announced a lockdown in Auckland. I've just seen a post on our mate. Hi Brendan, how are you? I've just seen a post on our mate's Tahi page that Jacinda Ardern has just announced a lockdown of Auckland tomorrow. And that's apparently going to go for 3 days, I think, which is bullshit, because she'll just come out and announce that it's, that's what will happen. She'll just come out and announce that it's going to be a lot longer than that. Australia, as always, we have in fact been the testing ground for the world in different things. Went from, testing nuclear bombs and whatever. And Australia and New Zealand, the people of Australia and New Zealand, we need to stand together and really tightly right now. Because we are the two most isolated nations in the world, we are always the testing ground for their crap, for their Freemason Demolay New World Order crap, and we need to stay really tight. So tomorrow I will Facebook censors are all over it. Good evening, Facebook censors. You're in for a long night. Tomorrow I will endeavour to connect with Anne and see if we can do a shared live tomorrow, in the hope that we can get some intel from on the ground. Australia, it's really important that we stand together as people, all people together. In some regards, what happened in Flemington in those blocks of units should have in fact got all of Australians out on the street, because that would have sent a very clear message to them that we're not going to tolerate it. Now we've got a situation where we've got an entire state lockdown, and of course our mates across the ditch are being subjected to the same things. So I will try and connect with Anne tomorrow and do a shared live with Anne so that we can all be fully informed about what's going on in the ground over there. Please share this video, Australia, while we wait for James to join us. But it's really important, if you have family and friends from New Zealand in Australia, that you make contact with them and let them know what has in fact been announced. All people stand together right now. What's going on in relation to our mates down in Victoria? All I guess I can really say on that is that I hope my fellow Australians saw what happened in Serbia in early hours of this morning. When people unite and stand together, we will overcome. And it's really important that we stay in touch with our mates across the ditch right now, and our mates in Victoria constantly. I'll just have a look and see if James is here. Let me see. I'm just having a look. He might not be around yet. I'll just have a look. Can't see it yet. It's not due to start till 8 o'clock, but just to my mates in New Zealand, we stand together. We stand together. Okay, and don't ever think that we don't, because we always do. Always have, always will. And I hope I will connect with Anne tomorrow, guys, let me just see. I'll just read out a few comments here, if that's okay, guys, while I wait for James. check in on those in Melbourne and across the ditch. Yeah, absolutely, Adam. It's very, very important because we have to exchange intel directly with one another. Okay, because our media can't be trusted, our politicians can't be trusted, so we have to talk to each other. And to all of you watching that think, oh, I don't know whether I can do a live. I sit down and I do these lives, guys, and I just imagine that I'm talking to my neighbour over the back fence, you know. I met a lovely lady today by the name of Lynette from Western Australia. We're just average Joes having a conversation and watching over each other. So I would ask you all, if there's anyone there while we're waiting for James that wants to come on and just have a chat, please just hit the little icon down the bottom there. It's like an outline of a person, you know. You just hit that, and then that sends a thing to me, and then I can just bring you on. And Graham's saying here, enough is enough. Time for all the good people to come together. Trish Williams has just sent a request, so we'll just get Trish on while we're waiting for James. And it says it's at. Hi, Linda. I've just read your comment. If you'd like to come on and join me, Linda K. Stevens, and have a chat, I'd really like to talk to you, you know. It says it's adding. It says it's still adding. It's flashing, so it must be thinking about it. It says it's adding. The wheel's still spinning. Okay. It's dropped out. It's dropped out. It's just sent me a thing to say it's dropped out. Viv wants to come on, so we'll ask Viv on. Viv, it says it's adding, so we'll just see what happens. The wheel's still spinning, you know. Who knows? I think the Facebook sensor's disconnected half the bloody times. It's not letting me add. It says the camera's not on, Viv, you know. I'll just try that again, Viv, because your invite's still sitting there. And it says it's adding. It says it's adding. It says it's adding, Viv. We'll see what happens. No, still not going through, Viv. I don't know why. Gabrielle is there. It says it's adding you, Gabrielle. Okay. What's going on? Hi, James. I can see you there. Just hit the little icon down the bottom of the. Or I'll just do it here. Hang on a second. I'll do it from my end, James. Just one sec. Okay. Okay, James, I've just sent you the invite. It'll pop up on your screen just down there at the bottom, and you just have to accept that and it comes on. James Bartolo is a young gentleman out of Melbourne in Victoria. He has a page called the Conscious Truth Network. James is just a young guy, awake, and yeah, James is here, Jason. I saw him. I've just sent him the invite. He'll get a little thing at the bottom, and then he can just click on that, and he'll come straight live. So it just takes a second, I guess. Anyway, James is a young guy out of Melbourne, Victoria. He has like an independent sort of media page. He tries to get the message out to people about lots of different topics, and he has a page called, I think it's called the Conscious Truth Network. I'm just James, if you can see the little icon of the person at the bottom and then a little picture frame, if you just hit that, that will send an invite through to here. So I've just sent you an invite. You can just accept that one, or you can just hit the other one. Sorry guys, just bear with us while we get this happening together. There we go. There it is. And where is it? Hang on a second. Sorry, I'm just, James, can you just send that request again through? Because I saw it flash up, but when I went to the list, it wasn't there. So just hit on that little icon again. Just hit on that little icon again, James, and it'll pop up. Australia, just bear with us while we get this happening. Sorry, we're just waiting 1 second there. I'll just wait for James to send that request again. James just sent a message and said it's not going through. I've just sent him a request again. We'll just give it a second. Just give it 1 sec. Yep, it's gone through again, James. Hi, Carlo. Hi, Lucia. How are you? You know, Adam has a comment here to all in Victoria and New South Wales. We hope you are okay and you are not forgotten. That's right. We are not forgotten. If anything, we need to ramp up our connections with people right now. James, I've just sent that request again to you again. So if you just hit that little icon, yep, it's right there now, James. So it's coming on now. It says it's adding, James. Thank you, Australia, for bearing with us while we got this organised. It does take a bit, especially when you're a bit tech-savvy challenged like me. James, it says it's adding. It's flashing now, so it should pop up in any second. Yes, Tracy Lee, New Zealand. Just Auckland at this stage has been locked down as of tomorrow. Hello, James. How are you?
Good. Beautiful. Okay, that's working. Fantastic. Just takes a little... I don't know what was happening with the invites and all that, but it's working now. Beautiful. Hello, how are you going?
I'm well, James. I don't know whether you just heard all of that, but Jacinda Ardern has just announced that Auckland will be locked down for 3 days. She reckons there was 4 cases of corona, and they can't trace where it's from apparently. So she's locking down Auckland for 3 days at this stage. But I have a great fear that the whole country will be locked down again within a week. You can bet your life on that. As always has been the case, Australia and New Zealand, due to our isolation, has always been the testing ground for Freemason, Demolay, New World Order filth due to our isolation. So it's really important that Australians and New Zealanders stand together right now. Really important.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, we're live streaming on your Facebook profile at the moment, Karen, so a lot of people are already familiar with you, but I wanted to do this interview for people who aren't really aware of what work you're doing and they haven't heard of you and they haven't heard of a lot of the things that you talk about. So basically just wondering, like, can you give us an overview of who you are and what kind of research you've been doing that's led you to this point in the work that you're doing on a practically daily basis now?
I do it every day. Yeah, sure. I grew up in Sydney, in the western suburbs of Sydney. I was raised in Fairfield. During the Woods Royal Commission, I was a young girl working in the CBD of Sydney. I didn't live in New South Wales and not know about the Woods Royal Commission. Oh, here we go. Facebook sensors have frozen us, James. Can you hear me?
I can hear you still. Yeah, I can still hear you. It's frozen the image, but I can hear you fine.
Facebook sensors froze us again. You know, you got to get used to that. Anyway. Yeah, I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. I was a young girl working in the CBD of Sydney when the Woods Royal Commission was on. You couldn't live in Sydney actually during the late 80s and 90s and not know about it. And when Scott Morrison got up in October a couple of years ago, 22nd of October, as a matter of fact, and gave the most appalling sorry speech I had ever seen in my life, all of that Woods Royal Commission and Judge David Yeldham and all that stuff, I sat down and I thought, and I knew about the suppression orders, and I said, how do you get 40 years worth of politicians all silent from all sides of politics? How do you get them all silent on the abuse of power that is suppression orders protecting parliamentary pedophiles, known pedophiles? And so I sat down and I thought to myself, pedophilia is a crime against children. So the first place I'd better start looking is where all our politicians went to school. And so I started researching all the politicians, past and present, right through all of our parliaments, and finding out where they went to school. And there was a constant cycle of politicians generation to generation that all get thrown up from a handful of schools across the country over and over and over and over again. That's odd. And so then I started researching those schools. When were those schools founded? Who were the founding fathers of those schools? Who was the organisation attached to, you know, and religious and charity and all sorts of bloody things. And there are some public schools. There are a handful of public schools in every state across Australia that are in fact Freemason de Molay schools. And so in the course of researching those schools, the common denominator was that they all shared associations. All these schools were affiliated and or members of associations, a variety of associations. And I post that link all the time on my page. That lists them all there. One of them being the Headmaster and Headmistress Conference. Others being the Association of Independent Schools. Do you want me to pull it off the wall and I can read it for you if you like? These are the associations I have identified as being the network that all these things have in common. You'll find this posted on my page many times. I post it nearly every day. In the course of researching all of these schools these are the common ones that I have found constantly throw up. And this is the network of how they network these children inside these schools. Because when you drill down on it, the facts of it is, every politician past and present in Australia has a Freemason de Molay connection. From a Freemason de Molay family, educated inside a Freemason de Molay school. Anyway, these are the ones that I've identified are the common themes. The Great Public Schools Association of Queensland, the Athletics Association of the Great Public Schools of New South Wales, the Associated Public Schools of Victoria, Sports Association of Tasmanian Independent Schools, Association of Independent Schools of South Australia, the Public Schools Association of Western Australia, the Association of Independent Schools Northern Territory, Round Square Schools Association, those ones are really friggin' sinister, International Boys School Coalition, the Junior School Heads Association of Australia. They did have a name change just recently to the Independent Primary School Heads of Australia, Australian Boarding Schools Association, the Association of Independent Schools of Victoria, Headmaster and Headmistress Conference. That's a biggie, James. That's a biggie. I posted a whole post about that particular organisation yesterday. G20 schools and the Global Alliance of Leading Edge Schools. These are, in fact, the Freemason de Molay. Just hang on a second there. That's an odd sound. These are, in fact, the Freemason de Molay networks that run within Australia. They network them through the schools. As children, they do in fact abuse against each other. You can cross-reference all of those things with the case studies from the Royal Commission abuse website. There's 57 case studies there. There's 3,953 published testimonies from abuse victims that contacted that Royal Commission. Literally thousands and thousands of PDFs that can all be read. These are all available publicly and I've read them all. And the network is undeniable, in my view.
Okay. So for people who are unfamiliar with the term Freemason or even Freemason de Molay, what is a Freemason and what is a Freemason de Molay? What does that mean?
Okay, de Molay. De Molay is the Freemason order for children. It is for boys in Australia. It's aged between 12 and 21 and the Daughters of Master Masons. Now, the de Molay movement is the boys section. The Daughters of Master Masons are attached to chapters of de Molay They are known as Sweetheart, Princess, Duchess, and Little Sis. They act as a mascot or ambassador for the chapters of De Morlaix. If you want a demonstration, for argument's sake, about De Morlaix and how that all works, I would suggest that everybody Google the murder of Lily, which happened at Stockton Beach in Newcastle. That is actually De Morlaix right there.
Okay.
They actually get these children to abuse and offend against each other. And of course, in their world, it's normal.
Okay.
They view incest and pedophilia as normal. And we know that because we had 42,041 fellow Australians contact that Royal Commission.
Wow.
And when people take the time to go through those 57 case studies, and you take the time to read all those testimonies, and you take the time to download every PDF, it's undeniable.
So
hence the reason we have suppression.
So if someone did want to check that information, where would they go? What would they type into Google? How would they find it?
Yep, you just go to the, which is an Australian government website. You'll find the link posted many times on my page. Oh, Facebook censors are all over it again. Here we go. Just have.
Oh, I've lost you. Say that again. Audio.
Okay, are you back?
Yeah, got you.
Yep. You just go to Google. You Google Royal Commission Institutional Abuse website. Okay, and it'll pop up. It's a government website. All this information is publicly available. Scroll through to the tabs called Narratives. Okay, where you will find there is 3,953 heavily vetted published testimonies. I've read every one of them. And there is also 57 case studies, okay, from things like Parramatta Girls Home to Knox Grammar, Xavier College Q, Melbourne, Perth Modern School. You'll find it all there. And you can go through those 57 case studies, and you can in fact download the PDFs of where, for argument's sake, letters were submitted as resumes for people that they employed inside these schools. Because what happens is when the heat gets turned up, for argument's sake, like a teacher is outed or whatever, they get transferred in and amongst the Freemason schools. This is how the abuse continues to go on, because they are protected. They're in the know. So yeah, you just go to the Royal Abuse Commission website and it's all there. And yes, it takes, you know, a good couple of months to go through them all. But it's very important that every Australian does.
So what I know about Freemasons is that on the outside, they come across as an altruistic charity almost. And then they have an inner circle that they set tests for people who are in the Freemasons to see if they qualify, I guess, to join into that inner circle and move up the ranks. And as they move up the ranks, they do more and more what good people would describe as evil. Is that basically correct?
No, not in my view, James, not in my view. First question is, what sort of person wants to be involved in a secret society? There's your first red flag. Secondly, those in the know are in fact bred in the know. And if you trace the history of the family trees of people that have been in our parliaments and judiciary in Australia, as I have, useful tool for that, James, is the Australian Dictionary of Biography. I've gone through that many times with my fellow Australians about how to use that Australian Dictionary of Biography. It's online. It's a free thing. Very important that no matter whose name you're researching, that you also make the connections on their family, who they marry, how they're crossed over and paired off with inside Freemason De Morlaix. Classic example of that in, say, recent times. Michael Kroger from there in Melbourne. I'm sure that's a name you'll probably know. He was originally paired off with Andrew Peacock's daughter for the purposes of breeding, both of them inside Freemason de Molay. Of course, that only lasts a couple of years, but there's a few prodigies produced, and the cycle continues on again. The Australian Dictionary of Biography, it's a very important tool for locating who married who, how many offspring they had, where they pop up. Very useful tool. Yeah, so that is the network, you see, and James, it's actually been going on since the days of the First Fleet. Now, there's a few things that in the course of doing what I did, naturally you have to ask about how education started in Australia, which formal education began with the Sydney Grammar Schools Act of 1854. And there's a little clause within that Sydney Grammar Schools Act which ensures the closed shop of filth for those in the know. And that was the very first act of formal education passed through our parliaments, you see. And what it says in that act is that the Board of Trustees for these schools must be appointed and approved of by the governor. How do you think you get appointed by the governor?
Not sure.
It's called breeding. You have to come from a Freemason de Molay family, or you have to be groomed from childhood and prospered into the network. That's how it works. I'll show you if you like, James, because I have all these things on my walls because I do these little lives for everybody. Just hang on for 1 sec. I'll just flick the camera around here so you can see. That's the Sydney Grammar Schools Act of 1854. Okay? Yeah. If you zone in on number 1 there, you'll find all the links posted on my page many times. There shall be nominated and appointed by the governor with the advice of his executive council, a body of trustees. Yeah, so you see, it's a closed shop. You have to be certified by the governor. Now, if you come here to the Australian Constitution, okay, that's the Australian Constitution. If you come down to this little section here, okay, part 2, the Senate, point 7. This is really interesting, James, because this is how they ensured the closed shop of filth. Nobody's getting in that's not a Freemason. And part 2.7, the Senate is chosen for a term of 6 years, and the names of the senators chosen for each state shall be certified by the governor to the Governor-General. Yeah, okay. You see, you don't get on a ballot paper unless you've been certified. And how you get certified is who you're bred from. And now, what they did in the bit for the House of Representatives was a clever use of doublespeak. Okay, because that can be found at point 16. The qualifications of a senator shall be the same as those of a member of the House of Representatives. You see, that was a cleverly worded backspeak that means the same thing as point 7. It means you've got to be certified by the governor. Okay? And how you get certified by the governor is they're the ones that hold the roll call of filth.
Which governor is
this? State governor.
Okay.
The state governors of every state hold the roll call of breeding filth, that is Freemason de Molay. When it comes to the federal government, okay, the Governor-General, which is sort of the federal one, he's the head honcho. Yes, right. He's the master, the keeper of the roll. And so you don't get on a ballot paper in Australia. You don't get your name on a ballot paper in Australia unless you've been certified by the governor to the Governor-General.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is all the politicians in Australia are a part of this secret society, this network called Freemasonry and Freemason Demolays. And
That's correct.
so because, I mean, most people already know we've got an illegitimate government anyway, but it's controlled by this secret society, which the power hierarchy doesn't end in Australia, right? That keeps on going up and up and up. That's a foreign controlled society.
The monarch is the head honcho of Freemasonry, James.
Yeah, okay.
And she administers that via her first cousin, the Duke of Kent, at the moment. When you go back through all the governors that we've ever had in Australia, okay, and the very first parliaments that we had before we actually had elections, okay, they were appointed as pillars of the society, so-called pillars of society. When you actually take the time to research those people, where they went to school and who's their daddy, it's very, very important, James, that every Australian knows. You must ask those questions of every political candidate. Where did you go to school and who's your daddy? And you've got to know everything about that daddy. You've got to know who they married, how many children they had, what they did for a living, what charity organisations they were attached to, all of that. You've got to know it all. That's
so when you say
find them.
Daddy, you mean like who's their father? Like who's the actual parent?
Firstly, you want to identify who their actual parent is. Yes, that's very important. And then you want to drill down into their history, okay? Because what they have is, if you're in part of De Molay, a chapter of De Molay, which is Freemason order for boys between 12 and 21 in Australia. Now, the leaders of De Molay chapters are in fact Freemasons, 21 years and older. The boys participating in De Molay must call their De Molay leaders daddy. Okay, so let's just look at, for argument's sake, Nick Xenophon. Okay, remember Nick Xenophon? He was only in the parliament up until a couple of years ago. It might be a name that everybody knows. Now, Nick Xenophon's De Molay daddy was Tim Costello. Tim Costello being the brother of Peter Costello.
Right, and so how do you find that out? Who's their daddy? How do you find that?
This is where it gets really interesting, James. It's about learning how to read a maiden speech, okay? Or their inaugural speeches or their first speeches. Don't you love the fact they use 3 different names for the same thing? The very first speech that every parliamentarian, past and present, has ever given in Parliament once they are elected is really a speech about homage and merit. And when you know how to read them, they're really entertaining. And in particular, with regards to Nick Xenophon, in his maiden speech, he goes on quite a lot about how much homage he owes to Tim Costello. And it's interesting, isn't it? Tim Costello, you know, so-called religious minister, he likes to go by, CEO of one of the World Vision things, you know, so he's living off donations supposedly and grants from the government. Never worked a day in his life.
Well, you know, as soon as they connect,
it's interesting to note. And it's interesting to note both the Costello brothers came out of Carey Baptist School, Carey Baptist Grammar School, Freemason De Molay School. And when you delve into the Costello family's history, long, long line of Freemason De Molay there. In their ancestry, they actually had a politician in their ancestry that was chucked out of Parliament.
Okay. So who else is a part of this Freemason network? So you've got the politicians. Is there judges, police commissioners, fireys? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. In Australia, Every judge in Australia is appointed by a politician. Okay. Now, the judges that are appointed are insiders inside Freemason Demolay. You don't get appointed as a judge in Australia unless you are from this network of filth. I've covered the judiciary extensively in my live videos, but here's just a little example for you. The year before last, there was a priest from Villanova College who was in fact done for pedophilia. Villanova College is in Brisbane, in Queensland. And the judge appointed to that case was a judge by the name of Leanne Clare. Judge Leanne Clare was appointed as a judge by Labor politician Kerry Shine.
Okay.
Guess where Kerry Shine went to school? Kerry Shine was educated at Villanova College. And when Leanne Clare sat before that judge, who had abused multiple boys from Villanova College and other schools, his sentence was very lenient. Isn't that a surprise? At the time, George Brandis was the Attorney General and said nothing in objection to that lenient sentence for that pedophile. And here's why, James. George Brandis was educated at Villanova College, as was the current federal member, Ross Vasta. And it's interesting, isn't it? Ross Vasta is the son of Angelo Vasta, Judge Angelo Vasta. And Judge Angelo Vasta was actually thrown off the bench in Queensland some years ago. But don't worry, all the bases are still covered, James, because Salvatore Vasta, his son, his other son, he's now a judge in Queensland. Salvatore Vasta is the brother of Ross Vasta. So the past protects the present. And those two boys, they came out of Villanova College.
So we've got this secret network that's hiding in the background in this country that's controlling politics and government, the judiciary system. Where else? What in the police force as well?
Oh yes, there's not a police commissioner in Australia that hasn't been appointed from this network of filth. That is in fact the closed shop of filth. There is no justice in Australia, and most of us know that. I mean, when you get 42,041 fellow Australians contacting a royal commission, and the upshot of that is suppression orders, that tells you, doesn't it? Because how do suppression orders come about, James? The politicians have to write legislation. The politicians then have to pass that legislation through the parliament. It then gets presented to the governor, be it state or federal, and gets assented into law, doesn't it? Now, most normal Australians like you and I, we know that incest and pedophilia are wrong, don't we? So why do you think our politicians would be writing suppression order law? Doesn't protect anybody but themselves and their network of filth. The courts are fully planted out with Freemason demolays. Hence the reason the pedophiles walk out of our courts with sentences that are offensive to every normal Australian.
Yeah.
Hence the reason Cardinal Pell walked out of court. All those abuses to tens of thousands of children out of that network that Pell was attached to. Well documented at the Royal Commission. Very interesting when you download them. Because you see, James, Pell's a very short name, isn't it? It's just 4 letters. And you see they're heavily redacted, some of those documents that are attached. And you know, it's interesting, James, because a lot of those redactions, those blocked out bits, it's just really little. It's just like enough space for 4 letters. So it's not hard to piece together who they're talking about.
And so I'm familiar, and I've seen Senator Bill Heffernan's speech in Parliament where he talks about the parliamentary suppression orders. What I'm confused about, though, is that if the whole network is comprised of Freemasons, then how did that even come about? Like, is Senator Bill Heffernan a Freemason that's bringing that up to the public's attention? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Senator Bill Heffernan, yeah, I do. Senator Bill Heffernan was educated at St Joseph's in St Joseph's College in Hunters Hill there. I would say, this is only my summation, I would say that when they are children, because this network is normal to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say when they are children, they are probably not aware that what's going on around them is wrong, you know, because Freemason Demolays is a very closed shop. Okay, they only mix with other Freemason Demolays. They're from Freemason Demolay families. They are educated inside Freemason Demolay schools. So their network of exposure to average Joe, it's kept well away. Okay. I would say at some point, this is my summation, I've never spoken to Bill Heffernan nor Franca Arena, but I would say at some point they become aware of what's going on around them. And people like Senator Bill Heffernan, who was elected in the mid-90s, and almost from the moment he got into Parliament, he was speaking out about this. He had been speaking out about this since, I think his very first speech was 1996. I covered that just a few weeks ago in great detail before I got banned on Facebook. Prior to that, we had Franca Arena, who was a New South Wales politician. And Franca Arena gave a series of speeches in the New South Wales Parliament from the early 90s in relation to the cover-up going on within the Woods Royal Commission. Judge David Yeldham, she named. The Mayor of Wollongong, Frank Arkell, she named. The network that was transporting these children between New South Wales and Queensland, it touched on Durrock Boys Home, Parramatta Girls Home. Parramatta Girls Home, for argument's sake, was inside the electorate of Judge David Cameron. David Cameron being the father of Ross Cameron. Ross Cameron is a name people might know because he was on Sky News, and he was also a federal politician during the Howard years. Well, his father was Judge David Cameron, and Jim Cameron, and Judge Jim Cameron. And Jim Cameron was the previous member for New South Wales Parliament for the area of Parramatta, covering the Parramatta Girls Home. That's how they kept a lid on it. People like Alistair Webster and Laurie Marr, Frank Valentine, who have only just recently been arrested for pedophilia.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
40 years of cover-up. 40 years of cover-up.
So Bill Heffernan is a Freemason, but he's one that's seen the light and turned around and said, hold on, like just because I was brought up in this corrupt system doesn't mean I have to stay in it. Is that basically what's happened? And then he's come out and he said, boom, I'm fighting against this now?
I believe so, yeah. That's what I believe. Okay. I believe Bill Heffernan and Franca Arena both. I believe that they are, in fact, very honourable politicians. Also, I'll just touch on Franca Arena in the 90s, okay, because it's really important that people know Franca Arena didn't act alone. There was another politician sitting in the New South Wales Parliament, and her name was Deidre Gruznoff. Now, Deidre Gruznoff, her maiden name is Brereton. She is actually the sister of Laurie Brereton, New South Wales politician. And Deidre helped Franca Arena in the background expose this network of filth.
So out of all the politicians that are currently in the system, how many would you say are actually on our side for the people? Like,
None of them.
And none of them. Is Bill Heffernan still in, or is he not?
None of them. No, after Bill gave that speech on the 20th of March 2015, the Liberal Party said they would not pre-select him.
Oh, okay.
So he retired.
So that fits into the narrative.
Because
that if you step outside and don't do something we like, then they kick you out. Yeah.
That's right.
So at the moment, none.
There are none. And you know that because every politician, past and present, is still silent on these suppression orders, aren't they?
Mm.
How does that happen when every normal Australian knows that incest and pedophilia are wrong? Therefore, if you're covering up for incest and pedophiles, you're equally as guilty. And across Australia, we have 837 politicians, state and federal, all of them mute.
Yeah, well, that's right. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. It's definitely true. So Daniel Andrews, what's the go with him? Obviously, he's a part of it, but what more information is so prevalent in Victoria at the moment? Like, what's the dirt on it?
Okay. Well, Daniel Andrews was in fact demolayed as a young boy, and his family relocated to Wangaratta so that he could attend Galleon College, Galen, Galleon College. Okay, he comes from a long line of Freemason demolays. Does Daniel, and the family relocated to Wangaratta so that Daniel, the chosen one, could be educated inside this network of filth. And he's inside this network of filth. Have you ever heard Daniel Andrews say one word of objection to the suppression orders?
Well, it's really, really easy to tell that Daniel Andrews is a part of the Freemasons because you can tell just by looking at him that he's a product of heavy, heavy incest. Just look at his face. It's not a normal looking head on him.
No, and that's another thing I'm asking my fellow Australians to do. And I often, in my posts, I actually put photos of them because it's really important that people actually take the moment to really look at the faces of these politicians and those in the judiciary. Now, in Bill Heffernan's speech, James, he refers specifically to Judge Gary Nielsen, known in the trade as Gorilla in Black Lace. That's the quote from Senator Bill Heffernan's speech. Gary Nielsen still sits on the bench in New South Wales. And Mark Speakman, the current Attorney General of New South Wales, has done absolutely nothing about Gary Nielsen. Judge Gary Nielsen, said from the bench whilst he was hearing a case that sex with siblings should not be illegal and that men having sex with children should now be legal. That's a quote from Senator Bill Heffernan's speech. Bill Heffernan says in that speech about Judge Gary Nielsen, "I find that man disgusting."
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
He still sits.
Okay.
He still sits on the bench. And Mark Speakman does nothing.
Wow.
Why do you think that is?
So is that just Bill saying that he heard, I can't remember his name, that guy saying that? Or is there the actual footage of that judge saying sex with children should be illegal and incest and stuff? Is there actual footage of that?
Bill repeats the transcript from the court.
Okay.
You see, everything that's said in court is recorded. Okay, so Bill was actually reading from those transcripts. If you watch Senator Bill Heffernan's speech, and I would urge my fellow Australians to watch it at least 3 times, because there are many, many clues in that speech, and you have to listen to it 3 times before you hear them all. In that speech, Senator Bill Heffernan says, there are a whole lot of prominent people named in these documents. Documents, plural.
Mm.
Then he goes on to say, in one document, there is 28 prominent people named in this document as alleged pedophiles. There is a former Prime Minister on this list, and it's a police document.
Yeah.
Signed off by Gary Crook QC, Assistant to Commissioner James Rowland Wood.
Mm. Yeah, we'll put the link
It
for
goes
that
on.
in the description as well, so people can easily find it. Yeah.
Yeah, on my page you will also find the transcripts to Senator Bill Heffernan's speeches in plural, together with the transcripts from the Hansards of Franca Arena's speeches. It's very important that we understand the extent that this has in fact been put in front of our fellow Australians by the Hansards. And of course, in the era of Franca Arena, when she gave that speech and outed this network of filth, the media and all sides of politics hammered her for using parliamentary privilege to do so. I'll just give you a little bit of history, James, that you might not know.
Mm-hmm.
Judge David Yeldham was in fact the CEO of Abused Children Association nationally, which means he had access to children across the country in that role. He was in fact a pedophile, and his brother, Peter Yeldham, was the screenwriter for a movie called Whipping Boy. Whipping Boy aired in 1986 and starred Sigrid Thornton. The Yeldham brothers, Peter and Judge David, were educated at Knox Grammar School.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Judge David Yeldham killed himself the night that movie aired, after having testified at the Woods Royal Commission. He was picked up multiple...
Did he kill himself or?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did. Oh, well, yeah, I suppose there could be a question mark over that. Judge David Yeldham had been picked up.
Shooting themselves in the back of the head, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, apparently David gassed himself in his car. That's what's reported. Now, what you've got to know about Judge David Yeldham and Frank Arkell from Wollongong. Judge David Yeldham had been picked up multiple times in the toilets at Central Station and Town Hall Station. Multiple times, okay? This is where it gets really interesting, James. Chief Inspector of Divisions 10 and 15 New South Wales Police in that same era was a bloke by the name of John Morrison. And John Morrison is Scott Morrison's daddy.
Yeah.
You couldn't make this shit up, eh? You know?
So how?
And it's interesting.
Because there's a lot of names here. I don't even know anyone that you're mentioning. Like, I've only heard of a few of these people. So you've been looking into this for quite a while, right?
Yeah, over 2 years.
Okay.
It's wrong.
So
suppression orders are wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But what I'm saying is a lot of people barely can commit 10 minutes into research, let alone 2 years and reading thousands of documents. It's, what I'm saying is people don't need to go to your lengths to figure it all out, but they've got to start, waking up and looking a little bit, like just 10 minutes, watching a video like this or doing some of their own research. Sometimes I find that personally frustrating, Yeah. Very well researched. Continue.
Sorry, it broke up a little bit there, James. What was that last bit?
So what I was saying is just for people to start doing more research. So Karen here has been researching for 2 years and knows so much. Like I'd probably say, the most experienced or most knowledgeable person in the country with this kind of information. Like you don't have to spend 2 years to get to Karen's level of expertise or knowledge. Like just 10 minutes, start with 10 minutes, an hour.
Yeah.
Because, there's people
You got to
fighting
know
about
where they went to school.
there's people fighting about the most insignificant things in the world when there's this kind of shit happening. Like literally our entire system of police, judges, politicians are corrupt Freemason pedophiles, and people, they're watching Dancing with the Stars or Home and Away or something. It's like, wake up. But yeah,
Exactly.
sidetrack.
Turn the television off. I'll just give you a little bit of information with regards to the media. Every person on Australian television, past and present, all of them are Freemason Demolays. All of them. Your Stefanovics, your Willises, Laurie Oakes, the whole lot. Kerry Packer and the Murdoch family and the Fairfax family, all Freemason Demolays, and it's not a secret either. You can find that information on the largest list of notable Australian Freemasons. And that's a really good list too, because from that list, they publish them only after death. But from that list,
the internet because they want everyone to start begging for 5G. Yeah. So
well,
where can someone find
that? Is weaponized technology.
Oh, absolutely. Huh. So where can someone find that list of what did you say it was, the Freemason list?
Yeah, it's called the largest notable list of Australian Freemasons. You can just Google it. You'll also find the list many times on my page. And you go through that, and it's extensive. It's extensive, to say the least. Goes through every Freemason right back to the beginning. It's a list out of Lodge Devotion in Victoria, funny enough. How you track the spread of Freemasonry across Australia, use the lodge numbers, okay? As they opened up lodges across Australia, and by the way, back in the early days, before they even carved up the country, before they even opened subdivision and districts for people to buy into and whatever, the lodges were built first. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So how many lodges would there be in Australia, like approximately? And members?
Across Australia, there is, in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, this is where it gets a little bit messy, right? Victoria is operating separately, okay? New South Wales and the ACT, they operate as one unit. Queensland Freemasons operate as one unit, right? So you have to look at Freemasonry for numbers via the state, okay? And across the state, what also happens is that, say for argument's sake, there's a lodge in some obscure place like Gunnedah, right? Let's use Gunnedah. My viewers will know I speak often about Gunnedah. But what happens is they will have lodges that then assign themselves to other lodges. This is all part of the network designed to confuse the masses, okay? Because you only understand how that network operates if you're inside it. Across Australia, okay, so across Australia, what you're looking at is about 70,000 Freemasons, okay? Western Australia, has about 5,000 Freemasons. New South Wales has, I think it's 30-odd thousand Freemasons, and the rest of them are divvied up across the other states. All up, we're looking at about 70,000 Freemasons.
But not all Freemasons are in the inner circle, right? Because they do have that outer.
Yes, they are.
Oh.
No, they don't. This is a fallacy that people believe, you know. Oh, it's only the low level, the low level Freemasons don't know what's going on. Yes, they do know what's going on. That's absolute bullshit. You know, absolute bullshit. What happens at the grassroots level? Okay, so we'll talk about your local lodge in the district of which you live. Okay, the people attached to the local lodge of which you live are in fact your school principals, they'll be your small businessmen in the area, they'll be your bank managers, they'll be definitely the police. And what they are, okay, your local lodge is like the spy network of the district. Okay, they're like the spy network of the district. And so they're the ones that monitor who might be rattling a cage on a local level. Okay, people wonder how it was, for argument's sake, that Alistair Webster, who was a former federal member for Macquarie, prior to that he was the superintendent of the Durrock Boys Home, and he was actually supplying children from Durrock Boys Home to the judiciary. Anyway, people go, how does that go undetected? It's not undetected. You see, the local level Masons protect it. They are equally as guilty. They protect the network of those higher up. Okay, so let's say, for argument's sake, James, you're at the local pub, for argument's sake, right? And the publican might be a Freemason, for argument's sake. And so say you're rocking there with a few mates and you're discussing politics, for argument's sake. You might be there with a few mates going, you know, incest and pedophilia are wrong, and politicians that cover up for pedophiles are equally as guilty, right? And that publican overhears that conversation. Right? And then he'll then have a conversation with some of his mates. Oh, look, you know, people are making some noise about this, so we better not say anything. You know, how do you think the media doesn't report it? How do you think that happens? Because it gets shut down.
Is the media part of that Freemason network as well, or are they part of a different network?
They're all Freemasons. Okay. Rupert Murdoch, for argument's sake, comes out of Geelong Grammar School. Geelong Grammar has a long history of pedophilia, well documented. There was a whole case study from the Royal Abuse Commission done on Geelong Grammar School. Okay. Geelong Grammar School is one of your high-ranking Freemason de Morlaix schools of filth. Rupert Murdoch, Kerry Packer attended Geelong Grammar School. As a matter of fact, Prince Charles attended Geelong Grammar School because Timbertop's part of Geelong Grammar School. When you look into the history of Geelong Grammar School, Boris Johnson, who's currently the Prime Minister of the UK, he was a teacher at Geelong Grammar School in 1983. And when you go to the notable alumni lists of the Freemason de Morlaix schools, okay, they are really interesting. The notable alumni lists of these schools. So every CEO of every major business, every chancellor of every university across Australia, all of them, Freemason de Morlaix.
And I saw someone post school principals. What about school principals?
Oh, yes. The ones that are the principals of the Freemason de Morlaix schools are in fact Freemason de Morlaix. How do you think? Okay, let's take, for argument's sake, Villanova College, right? How do you think that got covered up for generations? Right? You want to look at things like Sydney Boys High School, which is a public school. Okay, that's the school your current Prime Minister comes out of, Scott Morrison, Sydney Boys High School. Well documented for pedophilia. The principals that have been appointed to Sydney Boys High School right from the get-go, all Freemasons. They're in the
And
know.
someone's just commented a good comment there. How do we find out who are the Freemasons in our local community?
Oh, well, now that is interesting. Firstly, the thing to note about Freemasons, right, is they, you know, when you shake someone's hand, okay, and you think, oh, geez, bit of a wet fish.
Mm.
You know when you shake someone's hand, okay,
Yeah.
you know how you get that icky feeling? Pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. Is that your first clue, right? Secondly, all of these lodges usually advertise the time of their meetings, okay? Like it'll say something like the third Wednesday of every month or whatever, okay? And they usually say they're after usually after 7:30 p.m., but a lot of them are after 9 p.m. And so what I suggest people do is that you locate what day of the month and what time. And I would suggest that you go down there and you watch who comes and goes.
Another good question is, are the Freemason lodges still open during lockdown? Do you know?
I know that there was some lodges in Queensland that were actually doing FaceTime hookups like we're doing. Not Queensland, sorry, in New Zealand. They were doing FaceTime hookups to still have sort of their meetings. I was aware of that. I don't know whether the lodges are still meeting in Victoria or not. I would say if they were, there'd certainly be no one stopping them because the cops are all involved in it. Naturally, the cops are involved in it. How do you think all these children, for argument's sake, from Darrick Boys' home, spent over a quarter of a century being abused?
And is this
Lots of
police
them had
from
actually
every
escaped.
level? Is this police from every level, or
Sorry?
is it so police that are Freemasons? Is it your constables and stuff at the bottom, or is it once they get above sergeant or a certain rank?
I understand it that you don't get promoted inside any police force unless you are in fact a Freemason. Right?
Okay.
Now you'll find if you spend a bit of time and talk to a few police officers, especially the ones that decide to leave under the 5-year mark, right? If you spend a little while talking to them, it's really interesting, James, because what seems to be the pattern is they're in there. A lot of people sign up, for argument's sake, to be in the police force because they think they're going to do something good for their community, right? And they're groomed. You got to remember too, Freemasons are constantly grooming. They are constantly on the scout. They know what they're looking for, personality-wise, temperament-wise, the whole lot. They know what they're looking for. A lot of these police will tell you that they were in the service for a few years and realised there was a bit of a subculture. Going on within. Oh, look, we're frozen again.
I can still hear you.
Unbelievable. And so when you... Can you hear me? Or James's end is still... Okay. And when you talk to these police officers, they'll tell you there's a subculture that goes on within, and it took me a couple of years to work it out. And once I did work it out, I got out of there. So I would suggest to my fellow Australians that any police officer that has resigned under the 5-year mark, they're probably your honest police officers.
Okay. Another question I saw someone brought up before, I think it was Andrew, he was saying, if the network is all Freemasons, then how did the Royal Woods Commission even go ahead? What happened with that?
Oh, the whole thing was a smokescreen. The whole thing was a smokescreen. Okay. What happened was that they had to come out with a little bit of theatrics. Okay. So they appointed James Rowland Wood as the commissioner, He's out of Knox Grammar School, by the way. Yes, educated alongside Gough Whitlam and those and likes of that era. And so you come out with your Royal Commission smokescreen. Now, it's got two purposes. It buys off the serfs. They think, oh, maybe something's going to happen, and it feeds millions and millions of tax-paying dollars to those in the know in the judiciary. Yeah.
There's quite a few people saying that it's frozen at the moment, so I might give it a second, because there was a few people, I was just checking the comments, saying they can't see the video, they can't comment. There's no point in talking if they can't hear that. Can we just get a confirmation?
Facebook censors all over it.
Yeah. Can people hear us now? Just comment if you can hear us now. It should have caught up by now, but yeah. Okay, just go over that again. So it was a smoke screen. Yeah.
Oh, they're all smoke screen. All of them are smoke screens. And the purpose of a royal commission, of any royal commission, is actually to feed tax-paying dollars to their Freemason mates inside the judiciary. That's all it's about. I mean, we've had the recent Royal Commission. It cost millions and millions of dollars to run that one, right? I think they appointed 6 commissioners. You know, they all sat there, and of course, they're all quite happy with suppression orders. McClellan, the bloke that was the head honcho commissioner of the recent Sexual Abuse Royal Commission, he's really dirty. I actually did a whole video on all 6 of those commissioners, all of them Freemason Demolays, all of them. And I would ask you, James, have you ever heard any one of those 6 commissioners come out and speak about the injustice that is suppression orders, protecting the known pedophiles in our judiciary? Have you ever heard any one of those 6 commissioners say anything about it?
I don't even know what a commissioner is. That's how hush-hush they keep this stuff. I mean, the majority of people have no idea what's going on, let alone this kind of level of corruption. No. Well, so the commissioners were...
Well, no, they're handpicked inside the network, right? It's the same as Ted Mulligan out of South Australia. There was the big Royal Commission into Institutional Abuse in South Australia, right? Ted Mulligan was appointed as the commissioner for that one, right? And he came out of, I'd have to refer to my notes, but I think it might be Pulteney Grammar there in South Australia. I'd have to refer to my notes, right? But Ted Mulligan came out of a Freemason Demolay school. Now, how you cross over with protection there, right, is that Gary Crook QC, who was the assistant to the commissioner in the New South Wales Woods Royal Commission, right? Gary Crook was educated at Pulteney Grammar School in South Australia.
Okay.
See the crossover? See the crossover there? So what you've got to remember is, as children inside this network, okay, they are in fact abusing on other children.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are where the bonds are formed and the sickness really sets in.
Okay.
And then as they become adults or teenagers or late teenagers, nature splits the pack. Okay? So the ones that have been fully programmed into this filth go on to be made prominent. Okay, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. Okay. Bert Newton. Okay, everyone knows who Bert Newton is, right?
Yeah.
Got up in the Logies. Got up at the Logies a couple of years ago and said that Graham Kennedy and Don Lane used to enjoy mentoring the young ones. By the way, mentoring's a Freemason Demolay code word, like sweetheart, princess and duchess. Particular is a bit of a Freemason code word as well, along with pillars and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, he got up there at the Logies and said that Don Lane, Graham Kennedy, used to like mentoring the young ones. So if you went to their dressing rooms and the door was locked, you knew they were in there mentoring someone. And the audience laughed because they didn't really understand I don't believe they really understood. Well, they probably did, the audience did, because the audience of the Logies is all the bloody Yeah, or your red carpet entertainers, supposedly. But the reality is, in this particular instance, so you've heard that out of Bert Newton's mouth himself, haven't you? Right? And by the way, Bert Newton's name's on those documents that Senator Bill Heffernan refers to. Anyway, let's have a look at Bert. Bert had a son. His name's Matthew Newton. And Bert Newton put his son into Xavier College Kew in Melbourne to be educated. Same school as Bill Shorten, by the way. And Xavier College Kew in Melbourne has a long history of sexual abuse. It's not hard to find it. It's in the Royal Commission, or you could just go to Google and type in Xavier College Kew Melbourne sexual abuse, and all these reports will pop up. It's not hard to find it. And let's have a look at Matthew, shall we? Yep. As a young bloke in his 20s, he had a few issues, did Matthew, didn't he? You know, they liked to say he was suffering from drug and alcohol abuse and that he had rage issues. They also liked to say he was mentally ill, didn't they? You know? Now I want you to imagine for a moment, James, that you are in fact Matthew Newton. You are born into this network of filth. You know how this network of filth operates and how it protects itself, how it involves every person in politics, media, and the judiciary. Who do you tell if you're Matthew Newton? Who do you tell?
Yeah, that's right.
And so what they do is, as soon as you get the sort that they class as a loose cannon, right? So what you do is you come out and you label them as mentally ill. And if you Google Matthew Newton, you'll find his mother and father came out repeatedly saying that Matthew was mentally ill. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, James. I actually met Matthew Newton many, many years ago. Interesting, isn't it? People that cross your paths. And you know what? He's a perfectly nice young man. Now, I didn't know all of this research that I know now about Matthew. I didn't know any of it back then. But he was a perfectly charming, nice individual. Young bloke he was at the time. Anyway, and of course, during the course of this research that I do, because incest and pedophilia are wrong, and those that cover up for them are equally as guilty, I started to see the pattern, right? When you read through those 3,953 testimonies, there's a pattern. And during their teenage years and into their early 20s, they often suffer from drug and alcohol issues, substance abuse issues, as they attempt to numb the pain that they're going through. It takes them into their 30s before they have actually matured enough to realise they actually haven't done anything wrong. But what you've got to remember is that as children, they do things against other children. And it's not until they're into their late teens, early 20s, that then they become mentally tortured, right? Because of what they've done to other people and that sort of stuff, and what's been done to them. Interestingly enough, during the Woods Royal Commission, there was a young man that testified. His name is Tim Roy. He actually testified that Matthew Newton had in fact been prostituted to Graham Kennedy by his father at the Boulevard Hotel in King's Cross. But of course, there's suppression orders on that. And so here we go. If you're Matthew Newton, James, who do you tell?
They'll have to make
they lock you up.
Yeah.
They've put you in a mental institution. They've drugged you into a stupor. Who do you tell?
Yes, that's sick. These people can do that to their own children. But I mean, it's Bert Newton. What do you expect? Yeah.
There's many a published testimony in the narratives at the Royal Commission. You can either sort by words like Freemason Okay. You can also sort by words like brother, father, uncle, all that sort of stuff. And then it'll sort those particular narratives for you. Politicians as well. There are relatives of politicians that testified, and those testimonies are, those narratives are in fact published. You can read them. That's the network. They are born into this network of Freemason.
I've seen a few comments, people are mentioning the Lions Club. And I remember there being a Lions Club in my town that I grew up in.
Sorry,
is
it
there a
broke up
connection?
again.
A few people have been mentioning the Lions Club, and I remember there was a Lions Club
they're
in the
all of it.
town. Yeah, what's the Lions Club?
Lions, Rotary, the Kiwanis Club, your men's sheds, every charity in Australia, okay, and I've researched them all, well, just about all of, especially the main ones. Every head honcho of every charity is in fact a Freemason de Molay. Okay. Now, if you want to drill down to things like your local level Rotarians, Lions, and all that sort of stuff, the people that are the head honchos of those branches, so I'm talking the president and secretary and treasurer of your local Lions Club, they will be Freemasons.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And it's really easy to identify them too. So let's say, for argument's sake, you might be a member of the Lions Club for charity purposes. You might just be a normal average Joe watching this, right? I would ask you, have you ever heard the president, secretary, or treasurer of the Lions Club of which you're a member? Have you ever heard them say one word of objection to suppression orders protecting pedophiles? All these so-called charities we've got, James, you know, I don't see the Lions Club running a letter writing campaign to their politicians saying, listen, these suppression orders are wrong and we're going to get a movement going because this is wrong. Have you ever heard Lions doing anything like that?
Haven't really heard of
Rotarians?
them. People. They're all distracted.
All charities are in fact Freemason de Molay money laundering. It's just, they're all just designed to get more money off the serfs. That's all it is. And you know that. I mean, let's look at the fire victims, James, that happened over Christmas. Yeah. How much money did the Red Cross raise? We had 2,000 people that lost their homes. There's been more than enough money donated to have every home rebuilt. And yet that's not happening, is it?
Yeah, that was with the Red Cross, wasn't it?
Yep.
So
and then you had that
have an affiliation with the Rothschilds then as well? How does that fit in, if you know?
The Red Cross is all via the monarchy, right? I don't really delve into much to all this crap about the Illuminati and all this shit because I'm tired of all the different names. I'm absolutely sick of it. Okay, you get people going, oh, it's the elite, like it's some nameless, faceless person, or oh, it's the Illuminati, or oh, it's this and it's that, or it's the Rothschilds. It's the network of Freemason de Molay, right? Now, how far up that tree that goes, right back to the 13 bloodlines? Yeah, I'm not distracted by the bullshit. Okay, at the moment in Australia, I have 42,041 fellow Australians that spoke up, and they're not getting any justice. And I would suggest to my fellow Australians, there are probably 10 times the number of people that still to this day cannot speak about what happened to them as children. And we have a duty of care to make sure here in Australia we expose this network of filth and we deal to our own backyard.
Something else I was wondering is, do you know what the connection with Daniel Andrews is? Do you know anything about that?
You've frozen again.
Can you hear me, or just the visual has frozen? Hello, I can hear you
again. Yeah, You're frozen again. You were asking me what the connection was between Daniel Andrews and then...
And the Chinese Communist Party. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. Look, that's really interesting that you ask about that. I would say to all of my fellow Australians, it's really important that you do some research on the spread of Freemasonry through Asia. It's really, really important. Now, what the timeline is there is Freemasonry started to make an appearance in China late 70s, early 80s. Can you hear me, James?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yep, 70s and 80s.
Okay. It's just that the screen's frozen and I don't know whether you can hear me or not because your actual picture has frozen. Anyway,
Okay.
So in the late 70s, early 80s is when Whitlam started to really ramp up visiting China, you know? He wasn't there visiting China. He was there fucking threatening China, right? Anyway, and that continued on through the years of Fraser, Hawke, Keating, Howard, the whole box and dice. Now, that was actually the beginnings of Freemasonry in China, okay? Now, you'll also remember in the 1980s, China brought out the One Nation policy. Remember that? That was about depopulation. Now, you might be aware of depopulation now because of the Agenda 2030 and the Bill Gates and the vaccinations and everything else. But in China, in the 1980s, they had the one-child policy. This was designed to cull the herd by half. You remember that? I don't know. How old are you, James?
Oh, I've heard about it. Yeah, I don't remember when it was happening. I'm 27. Young Taka.
Yeah, 27. I'm 52, so I've lived through a bit, right?
Yeah.
And of course, when you go and Google and start researching Freemason spread through Asia, okay, just go and Google the history of Freemasonry in Asia, right? Because it's really important that you track the timeline of the spread of Freemasonry. Freemasonry started or was revived with King Edward III in the 1700s, right? And they first started marching it into Russia. And of course, Catherine the Great of Russia, when she realised they'd interfered with her son, she actually threw them all out, shut their lodges, burned all their books, and told the Freemasons they needed to get out of Russia right quick. And of course, that really pissed off the Freemasons, right? And so then they started this huge propaganda campaign that Russians were communists. They were people to be scared of and fearful of. And all it was because they weren't able to infiltrate Russia at that time. So in relation to Daniel Andrews and China, what you got to realise, average Joe Chinaman, he's not your enemy. Can you hear me, James?
Yeah.
Okay. Average Joe Chinaman, he's not your enemy. Okay. The hierarchy in China are in fact Freemasons. They're serving the one world agenda. And how they're trying to roll this out to the masses is that, oh, we've all got to be fearful now of China. It's just a rerun of the shit that used to go on with Russia decades ago, right?
Yes.
Your average Joe Chinaman, your average Joe Chinaman, he's not getting any more justice in China than Australians are getting in Australia.
That's right.
Because their governments are in fact Freemason demolays.
Mm-hmm.
The ramping up of the infiltration in China began in the 1980s. And what you're getting here now in Australia is Chinese serving their Freemason masters. So we're not going to fall for that bullshit. We're not going to fall for this let's all hate on China crap because it's just a rerun of everything that was done decades ago with Russia. You know, the commies and all this crap. Your average Joe Russian is no different to your average Joe Australian and your average Joe Chinaman. The people aren't the problem. Freemason demolays are the problem.
Yeah, it's a standard divide and conquer strategy. If the people are too busy fighting the other people, they're not going to be focused on who the real enemy is.
and what their connections are. But we're not falling for that anymore. Where did you go to school and who's your daddy?
Yeah.
We're waking
Okay.
up. We know the
Absolutely.
network. We understand how it operates. We understand how it protects themselves. And yes, it is in fact a network of incest and pedophilia. James, I don't know whether you saw the video I did on the Street family. No doubt you would know the name Sir Lawrence Street. Okay, this is a big time judicial family in Australia.
Okay.
Sir Whistler Street, Sir Kenneth Street, from James Randall Street. This is a judicial family in Australia right from the very beginning. Okay, like they're quite well known, the family of Street. Okay.
Yeah.
Sir Lawrence Street, right? Sir Lawrence Street was the head honcho Chief Justice in New South Wales. His daughter is Sylvia Street, Judge Sylvia Emmett now, because she married another judge called Arthur Emmett. And they had 5 children. Robert Emmett was a maths teacher at Anglican Church Grammar School, done for pedophilia 2 years ago, right? The other brother, Robert was the teacher from Anglican Church Grammar School, done for pedophilia, had the worst category of videos and stuff on his computer. The worst category being snuff movies. That's where people actually die. And he was non-custodial sentence and walked. Okay. Now his brother James Emmett, these are the grandsons of Sir Lawrence Street. James Emmett is the co-developer of the Safe Schools program. James Emmett is the chair of an organisation called 2010. You see, what you've got to understand is, to the Freemason de Molay, incest and pedophilia is their normal. And they're coming for your kids now, because that's the agenda. So anyway, I would ask you to go and Google Sir Lawrence Street, and I'd like you to have a really good look at his photo. And then I'd like you to Google Robert Emmett, who is supposedly the grandson of Sir Lawrence Street. And I'd like you to have a really good look at his photo, right? And then I would ask you to go Google Judge Sylvia Emmett and have a really good look at her photo. And then I would ask you to look at Sir Lawrence Street and Robert Emmett side by side. And what you're looking at there is that's not his grandson. Or you can go through my videos, because I've had them on my walls many times. You see, I use all my walls as my little lectures, like when I give my history lessons. And I put all the information up here, and I normally turn the camera and walk people through the whole lot. But I would suggest to you, James, that I would need a DNA test from Robert Emmett, because I believe that Robert Emmett is in fact, and James too, are in fact the product of Sir Lawrence Street and his daughter Sylvia.
Okay, so if they're all connected in this network, how are they getting caught? Like you said, they got caught for pedophilia, Cardinal Powell. Like how does it even get to that point where
they're not getting caught? They're not getting caught. That's all been covered up for decades. It's still being covered up for decades. I mean, Pell got walked.
But why did
Why did
it get to the point where he even went to court if they're all in on it? Like, is it just a slip and too many people who are not a part of the network found out, or what's happening there?
Well, yeah, well, you see, what happened was there were so many abuse victims spoke out, right, that they had to put on some sort of thespian show and make it look like something was being done, you know, buy the serfs off with a token gesture of bullshit, basically. And so you go through the whole theatrics, okay, And the abuse, if you talk to any of these abuse victims, which I have done, they will tell you, they all know it's a show. They've all been put through the ringer that many times with the bureaucracy and the judiciary. They know it's a show. Right? But what happened was there was so many of them that it sort of started to add up a bit, right? A lot of people were like, geez, this is a bit off, you know. And so they thought, right, we're going to mount this Royal Commission. Now, we'll just talk about that for a second. So you got the Royal Commission going, which fed millions of dollars to your judicial mates, because it only benefits the lawyers and the people that are appointed as the commissioners. And then they open up a whole department of people whose jobs are there. And by the way, they're all, anyone working for any Royal Commission is part of the de Morlaix network. I mean, I'll give you an example of that. Judge Tim Carmody, right? His daughter Lisa, she's now part of the judicial network, you know, as a staff, research sort of, she's out of the ACT now. Lisa Carmody, her name, is part of the bureaucracy. Anyway, it's just a show to make it look to the masses like, oh, something's being done. But nothing's being done. And you know that because guess what happened to Pell? He walked, didn't he?
Is he still in Australia or did he go back to Italy? Like, what's the story with that?
No, I think he's still in Australia, I think. I don't think he went back to Italy. I'm not sure. I don't believe he's gone back to Italy, but I could be wrong. Maybe one of our viewers will know. But the fact of the matter is, nothing happens. Now, I'll give you another example here, okay? When Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister, okay, there was a big whole to-do about how Tony Abbott was releasing the cabinet papers to the Pink Bats Royal Commission, right? You remember that? Big hoo-ha about, yes, we're going to release the papers to the Royal Commission for the Pink Bats. Now, how come when Tony Abbott was in fact Prime Minister, it never occurred to Tony to release the documents that Senator Bill Heffernan refers to? Never occurred to Tony Abbott to lift the suppression order, revoke the suppression orders, and release the names on the list to the public. Don't you find that a bit odd? Given the level of abuse, which you can see here, that's actually the fast facts page from the Royal Commission here. I'll just spin that around and I'll show you, okay? Because there it is. There was 42,041 people contacted the Royal Commission. 25,964 letters and emails. Out of that, they decided that they'd talk to 8,013 people. And out of that, there was 2,500 referrals to authorities, including the police. What other sort of authorities would there be for pedophilia, do you think? But let's just have a look at that again. 42,041, 2,500 referrals. Do you see anything wrong with those numbers, James?
It's 40,000 short.
Hey?
40,000 short.
A little bit. Yeah. And Pell, he was attached to a lot of schools, a lot of dioceses, shuffled around a lot of priests that were abusing for the network of Freemason de Morlaix, searching out for the next generation that they were going to groom into this network of filth, because what Freemason de Morlaix is money laundering. That's all it is. It's money laundering. So that those at the top benefit. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Paragraph 10 in our Constitution. You can't abridge water, apparently. That's what it says in the Constitution. And yet, we've had all sides of politics selling off our water, haven't we? We got farmers dying because they got no water. And you know, they sold off the rights to the water to corporations. And you know what, James? A lot of these politicians and a lot of their families, a lot of their extended families, they've all got shares in those companies. That's money laundering, isn't it? It's downright theft. And of course, when you look into electricity, this is another good one, right? Electricity. Now, what happened with electricity? Just so that everyone knows, everyone that's watching knows, you want to know where policy's made from, okay? The policies that the Labor and the Liberal Party come out with. Yeah, there's no such things, right? Because what happens is there's an organisation called the OECD, right? And what that is, because what people need to know is the United Nations is actually the administrative branch of Freemason Demolay. Yeah. The United Nations is actually the admin. Anyway, so the United Nations has this little section called the OECD. Now, you might be familiar with the term, James, because a lot of the politicians, when they're being interviewed about things, they come out with, oh, it's in line with OECD guidelines. It's in line with OECD guidelines. Now, a lot of people don't even know what that is because any politician that's talking in acronyms, he's referring to some sort of admin branch for Freemason Demolay. Now, the OECD is actually policy development. Yes. And the politicians across Australia, all of them, they have a login to the OECD. Yeah, they log into it and they get their scripts. Doesn't matter whether you're Labor or Liberal or who's in government, they get their issued scripts and they stick to the scripts because they've been indoctrinated into this network of filth since childhood. Now, in relation to the OECD and electricity, now what happened back in the day is Howard and Rudd were called to the UNFCCC and they were told that they had to monopolise the supply of electricity across Australia. Now, Howard came back and he started yakking that it was too expensive to maintain the power poles. And Kevin Rudd came out with, we need to be investing in renewables. That was the scripts they played, all going in the same direction, the sell-off of electricity. Now, John Howard created COAG, which in fact, because it was required to get all the premiers to sign off on that, you see. And so like to agree to sell their state's electricity. And of course, they're all in on it. So it's no big drama to get this shit organised. And so they all signed on to the COAG and then they formed the NEC, the National Energy Commission, right? And then out of that, they formed a couple of sub-branches. There's 2 or 3 other sub-branches. I have a whole post on it on my page. And the whole narrative continued on the same way. Howard said, it's economical to sell it off. And Kevin Rudd said, we've got to find green alternatives. But the upshot was we're selling off the electricity, which in fact they did. So they monopolised all the networks across Australia into one network. And then they floated it and sold it off to the highest bidder. And of course, those in the know that bought the shares, Freemason Demolays, right? And of course, the cost of electricity has continued to go up and up and up. And what Australians need to understand, you need to really wrap your head around it, is that it doesn't matter who you're putting in Parliament. Take a moment to reflect over the last few decades, just the last few decades. And it doesn't matter who's been in Parliament. The whole thing keeps marching in the same direction, doesn't it? The sell-off of our nation. Our standard of living today. I'm 52 years old. I'm 52 years old, James, right? The standard of living we have today is lower than the standard of living of my grandparents, for argument's sake. Back in the day, the husband went to work, the wife was the caretaker, you managed to put a roof over your head and clothe your children. and mum was at home or your nana was at home to be the caretaker and raise the children. And here we are today. Okay? You got young people coming out of university with often $100,000 worth of debt. They're behind the 8 ball before they even started. You got a lot of young people that don't ever imagine that they're going to own a home. We have a lot of young people that think they're blessed if they find a place to rent. Do you see the problem? Because the Freemason Demolay is very important that they disconnect and disassociate the family unit. And here we are today. That's the network.
Absolutely. I've got a final question for you, Karen. What I'm wondering is, are all the Freemasons working together, or is there separate sort of groups and, you know, they're fighting for control, or is it just one like tight-knit group that all just works unanimously?
No, they're one movement.
All just works unanimously.
They are one movement working unanimously together, and that's undeniable. Okay? You name me, for argument's sake, James, tell me, name me one lodge in Australia that has said one word of objection to parliamentary pedophile protecting suppression orders. Name me one Freemason lodge or Freemason school or Freemason principal or any person attached to this abuse that has spoken out in the objection to supprestion orders.
So what I mean is,
across the whole country, not one.
Yeah, they might still be bad, but there could be different groups of bad people within this that are kind of like fighting against each other, that want that hierarchy, but sometimes they, you know, they still keep on each other's good sides for not revealing fraud. So to your awareness, it's
they're
all
they're in the know.
Yeah.
They're all in the know. They are all in the know. Okay, let's talk about Scott Morrison for a moment. We'll just finish up with this if you like, because we've been on for a while. I don't know how long. Scott Morrison often brags about how his ancestry can be traced back to the First Fleet. So does Malcolm Turnbull, for argument's sake, right? And that's the family secret. You see, Freemasons are in fact all related. They're connected. Occasionally, you'll get your sponsored in Freemason. Your sponsored in Freemason, prospered in, they call them. They are people that have been watched since childhood, usually of narcissistic personalities. Not usually, 100% narcissistic personalities. But the majority are in fact related. Across Australia, we've got 300 years worth of network where they do in fact intermarry, and that's all to do with breeding and the closed shop of filth. Like it says in our Constitution, shall be certified by the Governor to the Governor-General, because the governors are in fact the roll call keepers of who's bred with who, so they know who's coming up through the next generation.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in. All right. On that note, I'm gonna.
It's all designed to strip wealth from the Commonwealth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Karen. That was good. I hope people who are watching learned a lot as well. To watch this video 3 times over to get it sunk into your head. But thank you very much. Keep up what you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job spreading this truth, and everyone who's watching, like, share, comment, share this, you know, spread it out. We need to start talking about these topics, which
and
are
please
so
share Senator Bill Heffernan's speech.
Absolutely. Cool.
I need every person here watching it to go to my page and share Bill Heffernan's speech. Have a good night, guys.
All right. See you later. Bye.